Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Season 3 of the Rule 34 podcast. I'm Jack, joined by my fellow guest,
Mr. Solis.
And you already know what week it was. We are here for WrestleMania week, but not just covering WrestleMania. As you all know at this point, it's become the standard that when WrestleMania comes to town, all the other promotions basically come in and pile in and throw their shows throughout the week. And I attended one of those shows. Mr. Solis attended plenty of those shows. And there was just a lot to really take in from the week. But first off, sir, how have you been since the last time we saw each other?
I've been great. I am in the middle of my spring break and enjoying every second of it. I'm not traveling, but the thing I'm doing is whatever I'm doing so unapologetically and with no reservations, like the wrestling shows I attended, Jack. You know how many times I'm at a show and I'm thinking about all the stuff I have to do? You know, I might even leave before the last match so I can go do something, right? Or I'm watching a show at home and I'm maybe working at the same time. No, none of that this week. I'm 100% engaged in all the wrestling I consumed. And when it comes to, like, video games, I let myself play for a couple of hours. I go run. I went for a hike, and I'm not turning back because I don't got to be nowhere. It's been a delight.
Yeah.
Oh, you've been? I think you're just coming off your spring break.
I've been doing pretty well. I've just been, doing a whole lot of different things, you know. I think I talked about it to you at the, like, after we finished recording our, wait, was it really back then? Man, I'm struggling to remember, but I think I brought up the idea to you, the prospect of starting, like, a separate podcast for the sports content.
Yes,
of the
you
podcast.
Brought that up to me.
And I ended up starting it, and so I've been doing a lot of writing for that channel and doing episodes there. You know, I've been having a lot of fun with it because I really enjoy writing, and so I've just been having fun sitting here. And I also kind of, similar to you, have added sort of loose restraint to it because, as my dad puts it, since it's something you love, don't turn it into work. Don't make it something you end up hating. Just do it for fun. You know, if you feel like you're hitting a wall when trying to write a video idea, take a break. Or move on to another idea that you are having ideas of writing about, you know. And I've just been doing that. Like, some days I'll just be sitting there writing and I can get through a whole script in one day. Sometimes I get halfway through multiple because I just go bouncing off because I'm writing. But also I've been allowing myself the leisure of, you know, taking a break. Obviously, you know, catching up on all the wrestling I'm missing on the side. And just spending a lot of time with family. Like recently, my brother and I went to go see John Wick 4 together, and that was a fun experience.
That's great.
Yeah. And soon some family's going to be coming to town, I think.
Easter?
It's going to be pretty busy, and then, you know, it's just a good time, you know.
I have some family coming in, too, for the big Easter weekend.
Nice.
Easter and... There's a couple of birthdays in April that I think we've, are going to try to celebrate. My nephew's on the 13th. My brother's on the 10th. I'm on the 24th. And this will probably be like the last time in a while that we'll be together.
All right. Nice. That's good to hear. And similarly, this week and weekend was also a good time, wouldn't you say, sir?
Oh, I would certainly say so, sir.
Yeah. So, for the listening audience, since you guys didn't know, like I said, there was a bunch of shows coming in. But back in January, around Rumble time, Tony Khan and AEW announced Ring of Honor would be coming back in March for another pay-per-view. Or, no, April. Wait. No, March, right? Because it was the last week of March. Friday was the 31st, I believe.
It certainly was.
Yeah, they would be coming back with Supercard of Honor. But this time, they were coming to the Galen Center here in Los Angeles by USC. Mr. Solis's, what's the word? Alma mater? Is that the word? Yeah, and our backyard, essentially.
Goodness.
And so the two of us immediately said, do you want to go? And we made plans. Mr. Solis ended up going. I went with, who did you go, sir? A couple co-workers, right?
Yes, sir. The assistant principal at my school and our operations manager. And get this, I invited teachers, right? But they have families and they had other plans for their spring break. But one teacher came, but I didn't move fast enough to get the tickets, so he got his own, and he was front row, sir.
Oh, wow.
Wow. And we saw him from our seat, and he pops up on the screen a few times. It's really great.
Oh, wow, that's nice.
But we got to hang. You saw us walk into a restaurant so we can have a quick lunch before we walked into the building.
Yeah, that was the funny part. So I went with my dad and my brother, fellow podcast co-host Dom, and Ricardo, who used to appear on the pod a couple times back when we did it for the school. And that was a fun time. It's definitely probably been a while since my dad has probably gone to any type of wrestling show. My brother and I just went to our first one back in January. We went to AEW, and we, even before the card was announced, I was like, this would be a fun one to go to. It's relatively cheaper than all the other ones,
Yep.
And it was a pretty good time. The funny thing was, when it was announced, we had no idea what would even be on the card at the time. We didn't know who would be the champions, as there wasn't no weekly television series for Ring of Honor at that time.
Nope.
And when it came to me, inviting Dom and Ricardo was very sort of last second, but they were both willing to come, even though, Dom doesn't know much about wrestling, and Ricardo's very casual with wrestling. I think, he really only knows about WWE. And so that was the fun part was, when I invited him, he's like, yeah, I'm down to go and all that. And I gave him all the details, and he looked up the show, and again, he only knows WWE, so he knows them by their names. So he was like, Cesaro, Samoa Joe. And I was like, yup, you're going to recognize a couple people. And I told my dad the same thing, but funny enough for him, he recognized people who were formerly with WWE and knew that. But he was recognizing a lot of guys from their time in Lucha Underground.
Whoa!
So when he saw guys like Jeff Cobb, Willie Mack, A.R. Fox, he was like, oh. And I would look at him and go, they're from Lucha Underground. Because, that was one thing him and I used to watch. I think it aired on Saturdays, yeah. We would wake up early in the morning on Saturdays to watch that. And so
that's awesome.
It was cool to see him start recognizing so many guys that he was like, I remember them from watching them in Lucha Underground. And now, they're here on a relatively bigger stage.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, and that night was a lot of fun. And I mentioned it to you before, sir, so I got to mention it here on the podcast to plead our case to the wrestling fans. We were a good audience, and we were just likely not mic'd properly.
I tell you, that group had a ton of energy. We were cheering all the people at all the right times. And then when things got low, they started making stuff up. I wonder, Jack, what was your favorite chant you heard, if you could think of one?
So I had the added benefit of some fellow Hispanic fans being just right in front of us off to the right. And so they were going crazy during the opening match between Vikingo and Commander.
Uh-huh.
They were going crazy. It was funny because they were split evenly. Two of them were going for Vikingo and two of them were going for Commander. And they were at least in our section, they were the first ones to start the Lucha chant.
Hey!
And that ended up breaking out throughout the entire arena, so that was pretty fun to see. And then there was one guy in our area who, during the Daniel Garcia Tanahashi match, he was just screaming a bunch of stuff at Garcia about being a sports entertainer versus a wrestler. And that was pretty fun.
That was maybe, I didn't have to do a lot of explaining to my guests, but the one thing that they did ask about was what's the deal with Daniel Garcia, right? Like, why were we all chanting, you're a wrestler? And I told him about the JSA, JAS.
Yeah.
And I said, he's with Jericho and he's walking around acting like he's a sports entertainer. Really denounced the W word, right? And he gets it. And he goes, he looks like Randy Orton. And I go, you know what? He's kind of like that young, obnoxious, like good-looking guy.
Yeah.
I see that. We ought to just be chanting against him for his youth. That's to young people.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like what other chants I heard broke out. Uh, One thing that was interesting to me was at the start of the match when they made their entrances, that crowd and arena exploded for Eddie Kingston. But yet, like halfway through, it became pretty even with people rooting for Claudio and the others voting for Eddie. So it was just very weird to me to see them start off in fully support, and then after as the match is going off, people broke off and were choosing their sides.
You know, there was like a lot of people, not ironically, cheering for Claudio in my section, you know, like filling in the blanks with, you know, let's go Eddie. And they were either chanting Eddie sucks or let's go Claudio. And you know, not to jump too far ahead, but that match was one of the matches that didn't live up to my expectations. You know what I mean?
I
a little
feel
sloppy at the end.
Yeah, I feel that, especially like knowing the history between these two men. Like I enjoyed that it was like for a lot of parts a straight up brawl and all that, and the ending definitely ramped it up. But yeah, there was a couple of parts that I was like, God, that wasn't the cleanest. And then also,
and like I just found myself. I mean, like again, maybe the only other time I had to explain something to my friends was, because my friend Chris, he was all about Eddie. He saw that video package, where Cesaro or Claudio's in his, jacket, with his title. He's speaking very eloquently. Compare that to Eddie Kingston, who's in that hall, like that stairwell, in his street clothes, having to be beeped because he's swearing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, in between, they both answered the same question, or they both said something, and after all the beeps and all the, like, censorship, my buddy goes, I like this Eddie guy, like, a lot. So he goes, when's he going to do something cool? And I go, uh-oh, you want Eddie to do something cool. But what kind of wrestling inspires him? The boring one that you just announced earlier tonight. Like, that's his Jimmy Jam. That's what his Instagram feed's full of. So if you're waiting for, like, that code red, it ain't happening, Chief. My man likes to chop.
Yeah, I think that was the best thing, was just seeing, what clicked with my two friends and obviously my brother and my dad, because a lot of them, like, they didn't know a lot of the talent on this card. So it was cool to see, like, what was clicking with them and all that. And it was just insane that, like, when it came to Ricardo, he went in not knowing, who Eddie Kingston was, who Vikingo was, and he walked out a certified fan of them. He walked out saying that it was BS that Eddie lost.
That's great.
And it's so cool because when Vikingo made his entrance, I enjoy the comment he made. He was like, this guy looks like the final boss just because of the presentation he put into it. And I was like, it's cool to see, like, what, what's the word I want to use? Like, what other parts of wrestling really matter when drawing in an audience?
My buddy Chris, the assistant principal, right? I don't think he minds me saying, like, he's a very well-dressed guy, right? Especially if we're having an event or an important meeting. He's the kind of guy, Jack, who matches his shoes with his top, you know what I mean? And he's got lots of difference of both. And so, like, he's got that side of him, the very professional assistant principal, but he's also got, this sort of very proud, a Latino, a Cuban who, like, he's a normal guy who goes to Dodger games and is ready to, have a good time, have a beer or two. And so when he sees Claudio and Eddie, like, go back and forth, he goes, Solis, this is like both halves of me fighting each other.
And then, I almost feel bad for bringing this up to them because it ended up being like a letdown in a sense, but I think it just adds to that emotional weight. When I was explaining what was on the card to them, I told Dom and Ricardo, Samoa Joe is television champion and he's facing off against Mark Briscoe. Yeah. The history here is Mark's challenge for this television title. I think it's 8 times or 11 times, and he's won none of them. He's faced off against Joe multiple times, single competition, never beat him. His brother sadly passed away, and I had to explain that to them. I was like, it might be an emotional night. Mark's got a lot behind him. And they instantly, along with like my dad and brother, go, yeah, so Mark's probably winning, and it's going to be a huge emotional moment. that didn't end up happening. That was the one, out of all the decisions and the matches on the one, although I understand the story they're trying to tell, especially, it's Mark barely getting back into singles competition after after all these years of tagging with his brother,
Right.
I get the story they're trying to go to, but man, that was the one that I just felt most disappointed by. I was like, oh man, I really wanted to see Mark win that one.
Oh, I was into it, and I didn't mind the finish. You know me. I'll let a finish ruin my perception of a match. I was into it. I've got it here listed as my, one of those matches that resonated with me over the weekend. And when I asked my buddies, right, Chris, I said, what was the match of the night? Chris was like, ladder match. And my buddy's name is Willis McCarthy, right? Mm-hmm. They got a big kick out of the existence of Willie Mack because Willis goes, hey, I think I want to be called Willie Mack from now on. It fits. His match of the night was Joe and Briscoe. I'm like, hey, right on. That's solid. And I like to ask those kind of questions because, it gets people to kind of reflect on the event, but also there ain't no right or wrong answer.
Yeah. And, man, I think when I asked Dom, I think he said the Vikingo match and Commander was his favorite.
That was mine.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed that one. And that's the one thing I brought up when, I was talking with Ricardo about it when I saw people complaining about, the crowd not being too into it.
Yeah.
And I told them, I'm like, it's kind of difficult to be as hot of a crowd when you're given that as the first match of the night. Especially because
a bar.
I literally mentioned it in the match that followed, which was the Embassy facing off against AR Fox, Blake Christian, and Metalik. When I was seeing a lot of the moves they were doing, obviously they were impressive, but I looked at Ricardo and I go, it's kind of hard for me to go crazy and pop for these moves when we just saw Vikingo and Commander just do stuff I've never seen before in a wrestling ring.
Right.
I was absolutely blown away. And I didn't explain anything to Dom and Ricardo except telling them they're two luchadors coming from Mexico. That's all you need to know. Right. My dad, on the other hand, this was like an unplanned comparison. My dad, on the other hand, I showed him Vikingo's match with Kenny Omega on AEW, and I showed him Commander's involvement in the AEW ladder match that they had to determine who was going to challenge the winner of Samoa Joe and Wardlow for the TNT Championship. So my dad had seen what these two luchadors are like, and Dom and Ricardo hadn't, and yet it didn't even matter because everyone was blown away. If you had seen their stuff before or not, everyone was blown away in our section with just some of the stuff they were doing.
Did you notice, and did it affect you in any way how similar that Vikingo match was to this Kenny Omega match?
I noticed it a bit, especially the table spot. I don't know if that's a common thing he does.
I don't know either. I don't know if they were like, hey, do the table spot from that Omega match. Because they put the thing right at the same spot of the ring,
Yeah. Oh, man, that table didn't break.
I actually saw him at the Lucha show on Saturday night after WrestleMania Night 1. And I wondered if I was going to see him fight the exact same fight, right, for the third time. And then I wondered, well, it can't be because for two big reasons that you'll get a kick out of. One, he was fighting Laredo Kid, not Commander, who does all that rope walk stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm like, at least it's going to have none of that rope walk stuff because Laredo Kid doesn't do any of that. Not as much as Commander is all rope stuff,
Yeah.
That's going to be different. And then the other thing I knew was going to be different, I said there's not going to be that table spot because these people don't use tables, they use doors. And I don't think this guy's going to try to do that on a door.
Oh, man, I couldn't imagine.
How about the fact that they didn't break that table?
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. That table just didn't break. And
they're too little. They're little people, Jack. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it, especially because I don't know. To me, at least, when I was looking at the tables that they were using, because I think on the big screen they gave a close-up shot of one of them. Yeah. And I looked at Ricardo and I was like, that just looks like a piece of wood with the legs taped onto or glued onto it. That doesn't look like a normal table. And then the only thing that came to mind when I saw it wasn't breaking. I was like, well, at least it's better than those Japanese tables that New Japan and Noah and all them use.
They don't use tables, Jack. They use like benches. They use like park benches.
Oh man, but yeah, fun night. And then the ladder match for the vacant ROH World Tag Matches was real fun to see.
Did you hear about the vicious injury that happened?
Yeah. Oh man, I couldn't believe it once I saw the footage. And
you saw it?
Yeah, I saw it, and I showed it to Ricardo, and I showed it to Dom. My dad doesn't like seeing gruesome injuries, so he didn't look at it.
I was surprised because we didn't see it from where we were sitting. I don't think you could have either, right?
No, we didn't see it happen, but I saw the moment that like it instantly went. I knew it instantly went back because I saw like immediately they rushed over, and then I saw the stretcher.
All my buddy Chris wanted to do, he wanted to, one, have a sign. I didn't let him have a sign. I wasn't like, let's make signs. I hate him. But two, he wanted to capture a moment on his phone, right? So I'm trying to cue him up. Because you know when they're happening, right? But he kept, he wasn't quick enough to the draw. But we see Penta, we see Dante Martin, we see them tables, we see where they're standing, and he got it. He was so excited. But geez, I heard on YouTube, Monday morning, he goes, he says, don't look it up if you're squeamish. He says, think Sid Vicious. And I'm like, he said Sid Vicious? I ain't trying to find this footage.
Yeah, I know my dad.
I seen that Sid Vicious one and I'm scarred for life.
My dad is the same way. That is the one injury he always brings up. And yeah, so he didn't want to see it. And I ended up making a joke to Ricardo that like it somewhat gave the visual of what the injury was like. And it was basically that later that same night, he posted a picture of him in the hospital bed with his brother, and he posted like a paragraph, obviously, but he started off the paragraph saying, "We're all good over here." And I sent it to Ricardo. I'm like, he's saying this like his legs didn't look like 12:30 on a clock. I was like, I don't know what type of inhuman recovery they have, but I know I wouldn't be in a hospital bed after that injury saying, we're all good.
Goodness.
Yeah. And then
clearly driven by adrenaline, still pumping through his veins.
No lie. And then, real quickly before we move on to other events, obviously got to talk about the penultimate match on this card. Shibata versus Wheeler Yuta for the Pure Championship. When this was announced, I could not believe that I was going to get to see Shibata live.
That's incredible, right? Like, what? How lucky are we? Goodness.
How lucky are we that we got... Obviously, I was super happy when the card was being announced. I was going to get to see so many. But I was just shocked at how many foreign talent I was going to be able to see that I never thought I was ever going to see, you know. I got to see Vikingo and Commander. I got to see Yuka Sakazaki, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Katsuri Shibata. I was like, I would have never guessed I would have been able to see these guys, let alone, of course, all the other talent as well. And it was just... But Shibata was the one to me.
After we talk about the Shibata match and everything you took away from it, I actually want to talk to you about Tanahashi, too. Now that I realize that I've seen him once at, like, the Long Beach Pyramid, you know? Mm-hmm. But you've never seen Tanahashi, and you got to see Tanahashi!
Yeah. But this was the one. When it was announced, you know, to everyone else in my group, they know nothing about Shibata. So they didn't know, so I had to explain. But to me, when I saw that announced, I was so happy that I paid to go to this show back in January without even knowing what was going to be on this card.
Goodness gracious. How cool. Yeah. Was there any move or transition that you were, like, excited to see?
I'm trying to remember if he did it, but I know going in, I wanted to see him do the classic where he sits in the middle of the ring with his arms crossed, you know? That
I don't think we got to see.
Yeah, I don't think we got to see that, but obviously it was the finish, but I instantly knew what was happening when I saw him get Wheeler in the lock and then sit him down. I was like, oh, here we go. I know where this is going.
How about the flying drop kick in the corner?
Yeah, that one too. Yeah, that was so good to see. And like I explained to you earlier, it added to my experience. A lot of wrestling fans might not have a similar experience, but it added to my experience of just being able to get to explain the pure rules of the championship and the match itself, and getting to explain to 4 people why Shibata wrestling on this night is so important. Obviously, he's had, I think, 2 matches before this, but getting to explain to them just how long it's been.
I told my buddies, I said, he's Daniel Bryan, you know what I mean? Told he'll never wrestle again. And here he is on borrowed time, but we're excited. I'm excited to see him, you know? He's a real, like, no-nonsense guy, right? Black trunks, that's it. Black trunks and a bad haircut. You're like, he is not Tanahashi. He is like the polar opposite.
Yeah, and the way I explained it to everyone in my group, I told them basically the same thing, you know. He had this real bad injury back in like 2017. It stopped him from wrestling. He made one return afterwards, and all he did was come out to the crowd and say, "I'm not dead." That's all, pretty much. You know, like that's all he pretty much said was, "I'm not dead." Didn't wrestle for years, and then explains to them how this feud came to be. Where, you know, explaining to them, New Japan trains people in dojos to become wrestlers. They have a dojo here in LA. Shibata heads the LA dojo. He trains a lot of the wrestlers that show up in New Japan. Wheeler Yuta was beating all those guys who came out of the LA dojo and challenged the teacher, and now we're here. Shibata has only wrestled pretty much like exhibition matches. You know, like he had that exhibition with Zack Sabre Jr. at Wrestle Kingdom. I think he fought Ren Narita.
I think the Will Ospreay one was like explicitly a catch-as-catch-can exhibition, right?
Yeah.
And then the Ren Narita was also explicitly a catch-as-catch-can exhibition, but he goes rogue, takes the mic and goes nuts to this. Let's have a full-blown match. And Kevin Kelly's like, did he just do that? Did he just? And they just start going to town on each other. He's like, ladies and gentlemen, people are having a heart attack in the back because Shibata's trying to wrestle a full-blown wrestling match out here for the first time in 6 years. Or like, you know.
Yeah, and then the match
went into business for himself.
Yeah. And then the match after that is with Orange Cassidy, who his whole thing is not wrestling, you know, pretty much. So every opponent before, it's been exhibition style, or, you know, it hasn't gone to the full length of a wrestling match. Now, obviously, with the pure rules, you can see something similar, but I told them, this is basically his full-on return match. It may not go long. You're definitely probably not going to see a whole lot of striking to his head and neck area, but this is going to be almost essentially his full-on return match, basically. Or at least getting towards that style of match again, you know, like being able to wrestle. And that was one thing I explained to them so that, you know, I didn't set their expectations too high.
Right.
I told them how he's had to transition and change up his style from what he actually used to wrestle like back in the day.
Of course. So, you know, my buddy's watching like NCAA basketball on his phone, right? Got chants going on that don't have to do with the match. And my buddy's like, the match sucks, Elise. I go, it's like poetry compared to music, right? Are there choruses? Is there, you know, sick beat? No. Do things even rhyme? No. But it's incredible. It's incredible, but I also understand why people don't embrace it quite as much as the ladder match immediately before it.
Yeah. Yeah. My group was into it, you know, especially because Shibata was just laying it in. But, you know, I understood why during like this match they weren't as hot as the rest of the night, you know. I understood it.
Yeah. But you know what's great about like those pure rules, right? Like the fact that they doubled down on them so much for these matches, when somebody breaks them, like it makes the story all that more dramatic. You know what I mean? Like, Daniel Garcia versus Wheeler Yuta. I forget which one of them, like, really, like, abuses that rope break rule. And you're like, oh, you're kind of a jerk for doing that, but it follows all the rules. And you're like, oh, hate you.
Yeah. And then, of course, the shock, Shibata beats him.
Get this, Jack. The match is coming up. We got 2 matches left in the night. It's been an incredible night. And I tell my buddy, I go, if I have to pick between Shibata or Eddie Kingston winning their respective title match, I want Eddie to win. But if Shibata wins this, I'm going to be real worried about our buddy Eddie. And he goes, it's a big weekend, so at least maybe they'll both win. And I go, maybe. And then the Morgan Freeman narrator goes, but Solis knows very well that only one can win.
Yeah.
And then Shibata wins, Jack. And I go, no!
Oh, man, yeah. It was... I was real surprised, but he really gave him stuff. And then, man, you know who I'm a big fan of. So to go home and go onto social media and immediately see that in the media press conference, like after, like the scrum, whatever you want to call it after, Shibata says, I feel like I'm one step closer to wrestling Bryan Danielson. I said... I was like, Tony Khan, you can have all my money.
Oh, goodness. We ain't even crossing no forbidden doors. He's there.
Yeah. And real quickly, so obviously the main event, I just real quickly want to bring that up and talk to you about what were your thoughts on it and its outcome? Because that was definitely a raucous crowd that was ready to see Eddie win, and didn't end up happening.
I thought it started off hot. You know what I mean? There was some point in the middle though where I don't know if Eddie's just selling too well or if he's just gassed, because Eddie's always had that gut on him. You know what I mean? And he's fighting a guy who is literally physically superior, a more well-rounded fighter, a more experienced fighter under, like, the big lights. You know, I think, like, the story they're telling here is that Eddie doesn't always get to this level. Is it self-destruction? Is it he's not ready? You know? But, like, the writing was on the wall pretty early into that match. I knew he was going to lose when Shibata won. But, like, he really kind of, like... it's hard to tell. What am I looking at? Is he... phoning it in? Is he already beat? You know, and then he hulks up. Like, there's a Hulk up spot. There's like he gets up after a count of 1. You know, there's like a no. But like something that I think they do all the time in Japan, right? Is like that explosive like comeback, and then they like fall apart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of like being down, they're like pop up, hit something big, but then fall again.
Yeah. That kick out at 1 after was it the Ricola bomb or was it the neutralizer? I forget which one Claudio hit, but he hit one of those and he kicks out at 1 and that place exploded.
Yes, it does. But they don't capitalize. Claudio wins. And we get like that standoff with him and Shibata versus Claudio and Wheeler, and then we get that post-match promo. I'm still coming for you, Claudio. So, you know, I guess there's a thrill in the chase.
Yeah, Eddie had me busting up when they were trying to tell him we're not off the air yet, and he just wouldn't let up.
He goes, you'll give MJF 15 minutes, you give him 20 minutes, give me 5. That was a good line.
Yeah, oh man, that was real fun. But, it was a real fun show to attend.
What are your thoughts on Tanahashi? What was your takeaways? What were your favorite moments for a Tanahashi match?
I was definitely happy to see the high fly flow in action. I've seen a lot of people, how would I put this? Many people say he's got a smooth one, he's, a lot of people they don't obviously put him in the debate for the greatest, frog splash user of all time. But, people still, mention it because it's iconic and all that, so it was fun to see that. I definitely liked... I don't know, per se, if it's his typical match style, but I liked how he sort of knew his opponent in a sense. Like, he knew he was working with Daniel Garcia, and so there was like a lot of limb work and a lot of targeting on Tanahashi, you know. But it was fun to see, especially, you know, his entrance, and it's always fun to see these New Japan guys come over, because I've always seen like a lot of people kind of like doubt them in a sense and be like, you know, oh, they're not as over in the States as when they are in Japan. And the fact that he comes out and everyone knows who he is, everyone's chanting for him, you know, it was fun to see. And I'm definitely glad I got to see him, you know, especially because it's like I was saying, when would I probably ever get to see a lot of these New Japan guys? Other than maybe, well, now they have Strong, and now there's Ring of Honor who brings in a lot of them, so here could be my chance.
I hope the commentators really like named this, but I think it was super funny that Daniel Garcia, the self-professed sports entertainer, in black pants and nothing, you know what I mean? Like the supposed sports entertainer, right? Is up against Tanahashi, who came out in glitter and, you know, dangly bits and a big old jacket, a big old cape, and the rockin' tunes. He does his air guitar. Like, how much of a sports entertainer are you compared to that?
No lie.
It's like, we're talking about a man who, like, perms his hair, you know what I mean? It's dyed blonde, it's fantastic looking, and it always is. And you're like, and you're the sports entertainer here? He got out, like, more than out wrestled, right? He didn't just get beat physically, he was also out sports entertained, and I wanted to stamp that. And it was an incredible juxtaposition, and I love Tanahashi.
Yeah, that was real fun. I will highlight, just because I find it entertaining for whatever reason, I like the part where Daniel Garcia sort of like mocked the guitar, and then he throws it out and starts doing like a dance of his own to the crowd. And I was just like, that I don't know why I found that so funny.
That is very funny.
Yeah, but that was an amazing night of Ring of Honor. And how about you, sir? About the other shows you attended?
Let's see. So I attended the Lucha show on Saturday, right? That was a good one. It was a lot of jumping, a lot of flips, and a lot of fun, right? Vikingo was the main event against Laredo Kid. That match wasn't as good as the Commander match, but that was to be expected. It was like half as long. It was like at 12:30 at night too. But, you know, glad to have seen it. I was excited about a Gringo Loco versus Psycho Clown. And that one was a no disqualification. So lots of bleeding and lots of weapons and Spanish flies onto ladders. And that was good fun. Thursday night, first show I went to, Bloodsport. I've already brought it up. Timothy Thatcher, right? Maybe my favorite chant ever. My favorite attempt at a chant ever. John Moxley is going up against that LA Dojo guy with the mustache. Can you picture him? That one LA Dojo guy with the mustache.
Oh, I gotta look this up. I can't remember who this is.
Alex Coughlin.
Oh, now I know.
Right. So John Moxley versus Alex Coughlin. And at the beginning of the match, one guy tries to start the chant, Moxley's gonna kill you, but he's the only one who says it. No one repeats it, and there's this funny pregnant pause. And right after the pause, one guy from a different part of the room goes, "Nah, fool, Coughlin's like tough." Just immediately going, "No, I don't think he's gonna get killed. He's gonna hold his own," and he did. You know, lots of like headlocks turned into, "Oh, actually, now I've got you in a fireman carry because I'm so strong." The sleeper match of that show was Johnny Bloodsport, our buddy, right? Johnny. Oh gosh, he goes by so many other names. What's his original name? John Morrison. Johnny Bloodsport is there and fighting Royce Isaacs. You know Royce Isaacs from the Filthy Somethings stable.
Oh,
Tom Lawler.
Yeah.
Royce Isaacs is a beast, you know what I mean? And like was throwing Johnny Bloodsport all around. It was great.
Nice.
But everybody was there to see Kota Ibushi return to wrestling. He's fighting Mike Bailey, right? And it's a pretty everyone super chanting for him. He's super receptive and welcoming for all the adulation. And it's a very, even affair until they roll and Ibushi rolls out of the ring, which has no ropes, if you know. So Ibushi's fallen out of the ring. He gets up, everyone's chanting for him. No one's going to let that, mistake, make them think less of him. But he looks, a little hot and bothered for having fallen in front of everyone. He gets in, Jack, and he kicks Mike Bailey harder than I've ever seen anybody kick anybody. And it was it was as if he took offense to having been rolled out of the ring. And he just goes he lights up Mike Bailey, and that's incredible. And he wins with that V trigger move. Oh
man. Yeah, I'm super glad to see Ibushi back and
having fun.
Yeah. And I know not to be too excited though, because of the schedule he has at the current moment, because he's trying to establish a wrestling school himself. Yeah. So he basically was like, I'll probably wrestle once or twice a month until the dojo's or the school's fully established and set.
I heard these podcasters talk about that school, right? You're like, what is Ibushi going to teach anybody? Step one of being a good wrestler. Be born Kota Ibushi. Just have all the physical gifts that Kota Ibushi possesses. And he's like, and now I'm going to teach you how to fall straight onto your head and lift the tail to tail.
Oh, man, no lie. I have no doubts that he'll likely show up in AEW at some point alongside Kenny Omega, and I'm just waiting for the first neck bump that truly gets people worried.
Goodness gracious. But if I were to go top 3 matches, I want you to tell me your top 3 matches, Jack. For all the shows that I went to outside of WWE, it's Thatcher Barnett, the Kingo Commander, and Ibushi Bailey.
Nice. My top 3 from Ring of Honor, obviously, because that was the only show outside of Mania, and with time ticking down, we'll talk about Mania in the next episode, so I don't want to give too many spoilers away from there. I think my top 3 from that night, I think I'd go Vikingo and Commander at 1. After that, though, you know what? I'm going to put, as much as I wasn't super into, how you said, there was some down points in the match, and the finish was rough, but we know the story and the chase they're building, which is going to come back to bite me and make me sound like a hypocrite when we're talking about Mania. But the crowd atmosphere.
I won't bring it up. I know exactly what you're talking about.
The crowd atmosphere.
You're going to put Claudio and Eddie Kingston on your top 3.
I'm going to put it at number 2.
Goodness.
And, see, I don't want to put the ladder match just because, it was very similar to the Vikingo Commander match, Ooh.
Yes, I know what you mean.
But it was fun to see all those comparisons. But I think I'm going to put Shibata.
May I submit a match for your consideration that we hadn't brought up yet by name?
Huh.
Takeshita, Willie Mack.
Oh, yeah, that was really good. Yeah.
That was really good.
Yeah. I think I want to put Shibata and Yuta above it, though, just because I was into it.
There you go. I didn't put it on mine, because you know what? It was what it was.
Yeah. But I was really into it, especially because, I got to see Shibata. And funny enough, real quick, I'll mention this. There's about a minute left on this episode, so I'm going to say it quick. Did you hear that in place of Willie Mack, originally what was planned, if he didn't get injured, it was going to be Konosuke Takeshita versus Will Ospreay on this show?
Well, God, I'm upset.
Yeah, I was upset too when I heard that. And we had such a great show too, but I was like, that would have been even crazier to have on the card.
I'm gonna cry.
But thank you all for joining for this episode of us talking about essentially the indie experience during WrestleMania weekend. Tune into the next episode where we get into essentially the main course, WrestleMania Night 1 and 2.